Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you are here, you are in the right place. This is a continuation of session 2 of 4 of our series. This breakout session is entitled Master Scheduling to Elevate Educator Collaboration and Inclusive Opportunities for Students with Disabilities. My name is Dan Daher. I am the project coordinator out of the Riverside County Office of Education for supporting inclusive practices. I'm joined by my colleague, Celise Heron, who is joining us on the call as well. Before we get started, I would like to thank our ASL interpreters who are on the call with us as well, Jasmine and Patricia. If you are in need of ASL interpretation or prefer ASL interpretation, please pin the interpreters on your screen and they will be spotlit for you to be able to follow and access the ASL interpretation. With that, I'd like to turn it over to our guests this afternoon who are going to be leading us in this session, and I will turn it to Melissa and Lilia and take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our session. My name is Melissa LaBelle, and I am the Director of Curriculum and Instruction for Moore Park Unified School District. Prior to becoming director, I was a middle school principal, and prior to that, I was a middle school math teacher. Lily, you want to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon. I'm Lilia Magana, serving as the Director of Special Education for Moore Park Unified, and I have experience working as a school psychologist and a program specialist, and I'm thrilled to support colleagues around the state to support students with disabilities in inclusive settings.
So jumping in, our first slide is about our path to where we are today. In full transparency, how we rolled out co-teaching wasn't necessarily the best way to do it, and we've learned along the way, and this is what we feel is the best journey for a district or a school to take in order to increase co-teaching capacity at your school site. So for our district, co-teaching started organically. It was when I was principal at middle school. We had a special education teacher approach our general education teacher and said something along the lines of like, hey, I have 6 kids in my SAI science class. You happen to have 6 seats available in your gen ed class. Could I bring them, on the lab days? And then it morphed from just the lab days to like the day before, the prep for the lab and the lab. And then ultimately they were together in the same space the whole time. So then Lily was our director of special education, and I went to her like, this is awesome. Like, what can we do to continue to promote these kind of inclusive practices? So the first step is really having the district be on board. So that district level discussion is vital to the success of the program. So after that, we met as we rolled out the process. I moved here to the district office. And so we began the conversation with the school site administrators and the counselors. What do you think co-teaching would look like at your school site? Who do you think some of your participants will be? How do you think your gen ed and your special education teachers are going to respond? How do you think your parents are going to respond? And just really having that broad overview with them. The next was to really have a call for volunteers. Who's interested in participating with us? In addition, and kind of at the same time, we offered professional development for the entire school, regardless if they were going to enter into a co-teaching partnership or not. Once we had our call for volunteers, we decided that the best practice is typically evaluate that at the end of the school year and spend the entire rest of the next school year cultivating that relationship. Co-teaching is often referred to as a marriage, and you really do have to have that courting part of the relationship in order to have that success. And so what that looked like was ensuring that the potential partnerships were collaborating on a weekly basis, that they were meeting frequently to talk about pacing guides and accommodating. And again, this was still when they were separate. They weren't in a co-teaching partnership. And they can start to plan what is the first semester going to look like the year prior. Then that way we can really hit the ground running at August, 21st in our district of the next school year. So it gave them a whole year to develop that relationship. Once we identified who the teachers were, we made sure to continue to give them professional development. We were super fortunate to be a grantee with SIP. Danny comes out frequently. Lily and I start our year at the beginning of the school year with our calendars and with Danny, and we put as many visits with him as we can on our calendars. He usually comes for a good 2 days at a time, and we get into as many classrooms as we can. He's also done training here at our district office for our more veteran partnerships, and he also does a separate one for our newbies, so to say. Once we have that established partnership and we've decided that we're going to be offering co-teaching, it is really important that we provide an adequate amount of time for intentional collaboration. It's vital at the secondary level to have teachers have the same prep period so that collaboration is built into the school day. Again, there have been times where how the master schedule was, it just didn't work. We make sure if we cannot build it into the master schedule, that we provide them at least release time once a month, or if they would prefer to work after school, we compensate them for their time. So we ensure that they are getting adequate amount of time. We like to engage with the data. And with the data, it's not just looking at who would qualify for going into a co-taught class, but it's really looking at what impact does co-teaching have on the entire class, not just our special ed students, not just our gen ed students, but the entire class. In addition, we like to see, we've created kind of like a profile of students that would fit co-teaching. Typically, in our first couple years of really having like a solid program, we noticed that there was a spike in the number of students that were being referred to co-teaching. And it wasn't because we had more students with the needs. I think it came from a place of goodness that we are over-identifying students for co-teaching. And so that's where developing that profile really helped. I think another success from the co-teaching model is that when a gen ed teacher is co-teaching, typically in our district, they're not doing it the entire day. So they tend to have a class that's your typical gen ed class. They take a lot of the accommodations and the supports and scaffold that they've learned from their special ed counterpart in co-teaching and are bringing them into their other sections. So we've proven that we don't have to put the students in a co-taught class, that they are going to be able to be supported in a gen ed setting as well. And then lastly, it's really eliminating those barriers. Having those one-on-one discussions with the teachers is vital. I think our co-teachers are probably the teachers that Lily and I speak to the most. We have a really good rapport with them. And it's just finding out like what are potentially the roadblocks from preventing them from going into co-teaching. And if they're there, what kind of supports can we offer them to ensure that their, quote unquote, marriage is successful and that we can sustain the program. And with that, I'm going to throw it over to Lilia.
Great. I'm going to take some time to share with you some forms that we have developed to support inclusive practices. The following here is a case management tool that both the special education department and the general education department came together to develop. What we're missing on this form here would be a column on the left-hand side listing each of our children who will be referred to their courses. So as you can see, we've got a column for each core curriculum and elective course and or services being provided through the IEP so that we can collect data, engage with the data, which then drives our master scheduling. And what you'll see here, what Melissa helped us with, is that we develop some drop-down tools to be able to show if the child needs a gen ed math course or a co-taught course for each of the course subjects. And as Melissa mentioned, the first couple of years, we saw a huge amount of referrals to our co-taught classes when a majority of our students with disabilities could be effectively serviced in the general education classroom. And so that's how we're engaging our staff to have conversations and eliminating some barriers from students accessing general education and special education courses. This data, the caseload management tool, also helps us engage in conversations about what courses our students might need, how often we're referring students to particular courses, and it allows our middle school and elementary staff to also engage and have conversations about what our student needs are. This form here is provided to our school principals at each school site to continue having discussions about data and making data-driven conversations for each of our students. Again, what we're missing here is a column for each student. Now, this is a general education form and not just for students with disabilities. What's lovely about this form is that we can consider state testing scores, whether the student has an IEP. You can see a column here for 504 plans, and we are able to track our students over time and monitor their progress, which really allows our teams to have multiple opportunities to discuss placement options and eliminating barriers for students. The goal here from the district level is that our school principals receive this information, review the form, enter data for students, track students over time to ensure that we're offering inclusive settings, and also engage school site staff, teachers, co-teachers with this data so that we can continue to progress monitor all of our students.
So getting into the actual master schedule, it's not easy. If anyone has ever had the pleasure of doing a master schedule, you know that it is an art in and of itself. This is from one of our particular middle schools. This is Chaparral Middle School. They are kind of in the middle, 2/3, I would say, of rolling out co-teaching. So currently in 6th grade, they have only co-taught classes in addition to gen ed classes offered. In 7th grade, we have one class of SAI still available. So we're slowly rolling out to hopefully just offer co-teaching. The smaller image, you can see how within our student information system, we happen to use Q, how it's listed. A couple of pitfalls that we have learned throughout the years is, first of all, your content teacher has to be named as the teacher of record, the primary teacher of record. And then the ed specialist gets added on as a team teacher. But when it goes through CalPATS, it always evaluates the first teacher. So with ensuring that our teachers' credentials are highly qualified for the particular subject area they're teaching, you have to list that content teacher first. We also, when we first rolled it out, we didn't know how to add both teachers in this way so that both teachers had the equity of taking attendance, accessing the grade book. We ensured that everything now has both of their names, both of their email addresses, so parents can, communicate with both of them. It's very much both teachers listed on everything so that there's not the confusion of, oh, which teacher am I supposed to connect with? The other thing, and this could just be a preference that we stumbled on, but we found that it actually was not helpful to use placeholder classes within the information system when scheduling students. We thought like, oh, okay, we'll use a course that we don't actually use on our day-to-day, and we would schedule in the students with IEPs that needed to be in co-teaching in that placeholder class, and then move them into the gen ed class once the loader had finished loading. It just created a bigger mess. And so what we found is, to start, if you actually build the class with the special ed teacher's name first, and you force the co-teaching students to be, having to take a course with that teacher, when the loader loads it, it'll force them into that class, and then you go back and you switch it to, say, the math teacher's name first. That seems to be a much cleaner route for the master schedule. A couple other things. The first time we were doing co-teaching, the loader sometimes loads more than what you wanted. So we had identified 10 students that should be in a co-taught class. Next thing you know, we ran the loader and suddenly there was 20 students with IEPs in that course. And so obviously at that point, it's not really considered a gen ed class. The other thing you can see in the master schedule, like some of our co-teachers have common preps. We try our best to accommodate that. As with most master schedules, you always start with what we call our singletons. And so you kind of build around those first. We found early on that initially when we were rolling it out that we would have, say, like 2 co-taught math classes for 6th grade and then 1 SAI math class for 6th grade. And it was a scheduling nightmare. And it also felt that it was contradictory to our values. If we were saying that we believe that students should be included in the gen ed setting, why were we continuing to offer an SAI class? Why were we saying that these students didn't deserve to go into the co-taught class? So that's where we've done the rollout process with having only the co-taught classes being offered. Next slide, Lilia.
I would like to discuss with you some of the lessons that we learned along the way when we're shifting our practices from segregating our students in special education courses to then having them participate with typical peers. First off, we really needed to focus on what our purpose, what our mission is for co-teaching. And as Melissa mentioned, that really came from the district level and being able to provide professional development across the board to our site administrators, to our teachers, to our classified staff, so that really everybody knew that we're working towards the same goal. And again, that ties into the next idea of transparency and collaboration, ensuring that our school counselors, our school psychologists, our speech and language therapists understand what our purpose, what our vision is, so that staff don't feel like, hey, this initiative is coming from the district level, but rather we're all aware of what our purpose is and we are coming along with it. Melissa pointed out to you earlier that we really made a strong call for volunteers when we initially started our process so that we could work with staff who were going to buy into co-teaching. We didn't want staff to feel like they were being told they were going to be co-teachers. We wanted them to, as Melissa said, build this process organically with us, so that we could have positive relationships moving forward. Along that spectrum, we ensured that we were making data-informed decisions and that our IEP teams, our case managers, were having clear conversations with parents that were data-driven when making placement options for our students. We didn't want to guess who should be going into a co-taught Algebra 1 class or who should be going into a Math 6 class. We wanted to be able to give our staff clear guidelines as to who could participate in these co-taught classes. And we have learned and have grown along the way as Melissa mentioned, we are now offering all co-taught ELA and math classes, and we are no longer offering any SAI courses at our middle school level as a result of such a positive process that we've had in our school district. Again, I point that out to being in alignment with our prioritizing to support all students across the district. We, as Melissa mentioned when she was going over that schedule with you, is that we really had to focus on removing scheduling conflicts and focusing on our students with disabilities first to ensure that all students are in the least restrictive environment and that we're offering them a free and appropriate public education. So we must admit we had challenges. It wasn't smooth sailing for us. As you're all experiencing in California, we have staffing shortages. We've had some staffing turnarounds that have really impacted our ability to grow co-teaching at some of our school sites. So we do want to acknowledge those challenges with you. As you might experience with any master schedule, you will come up with some individual student challenges when trying to figure out their master schedule. And you'll just have to work out each one with your school counselor or your site administrator to make things fall into place as best as you can. And as site and district administrators, we've had to coach our teachers through the co-teaching process to help them develop relationships. So as an administrator, if I have administrators in the room, you really have to understand who you are and what your biases are so that you can then support your co-teacher who might have some conflict with their other co-teacher, to really work on that pairing and have that symbiotic relationship to work with one another. And a key piece for us here in Moore Park is allowing and reinforcing and providing those collaborative opportunities so that our co-teachers can work together and work out some issues that they might have and addressing what each of their roles is in the classroom. I think one of the most challenging pieces for myself as an individual is all the work that it takes to focus on equitable and access mindset with all of our staff, not only our teachers, but also our administrators, really having those socio-political conversations with staff that are gonna drive the change. I think that for me has been the biggest challenge in my career as we have made these changes in our co-teaching practices. And then the last one is really reinforcing that a co-taught classroom is both teachers' classroom, right? They both belong in that room. So you really want to ensure as an administrator that you're looking to see that each of the teachers has a space, they have all the supplies that they need. And if you're a co-teacher, we want you to advocate and ensure that you have a safe working environment in the room and that you have all the tools that you need to make this a successful environment for everybody.
And as I said earlier, everything has not been rainbows and butterflies, but we do have a lot of successes that we are super proud of. Again, if there's administrators in the room, it's really important throughout your journey to highlight the successes, regardless if they're big or small, that your co-teaching partnerships are, bringing to light. So some things that we've had was a decrease in behavior referrals now that the students were with their gen ed peers. We've had increased academic outcomes for all students, that's gen ed and special ed students. We've had report card data improvements. We've seen improvements on our CAF scores. We've improved the social and emotional outcomes for all of our students. We're noticing that our students with disability inclusion data has increased at least 20%. We think it's higher than that, but we're thinking there's an issue with CalPADS reporting that. And an increase in the compliance of the IEP accommodations. And I think that helps also in the gen ed classes that are not co-taught. When we think about it, when we all did our teacher preparation programs, me as a gen ed teacher, I had one class on working with special populations. And then when you look at the flip side, that, you know, people that have earned their special education credential, they're focusing on accommodating, scaffolding, providing those additional support, but they get very little in the content area. So it truly is a great marriage between the two programs. Lily and I were at our county office yesterday, and someone asked how the parents have responded. And knock on wood, we have not received any complaints from parents. Again, both gen ed and special education parents, it really seems to be improving not only academically, but even school morale. It's no longer identifying those students, it's becoming an our students school-wide and campus-wide.
I'm going to take a few moments here to talk to you about how our special education department has conversations about data and facilitates recommendations for students with disabilities to participate along the continuum. First off, our program specialists hold monthly case management meetings at their school site where they meet with the special education department regularly and discuss cases. I shared with you here a form. If you can click on that, Melissa, we could share with them where we make data-driven conversations or have data-driven conversations utilizing this form. So this form will be available to you all, and it'll help your school psychologist, case manager, service providers have conversations about the student based on the student's profile. So I just wanted to share that link. Melissa, if we can go back. We do offer our co-teachers 2 hours of monthly collaboration time with each other so they could have additional time throughout their school year to work on their relationship, to calibrate their instructional practices in the classroom and calibrate their methodology. We've also been working and providing professional development to our speech language therapists, to our occupational therapists on push-in models for the additional service delivery. And I have had positive feedback from our specialists who are going in and providing small group speech and language or potentially individual OT into the co-taught classroom. And providing intervention supports to students who might be in the room as well. What's lovely about that piece is that then your general education teacher and your special education teacher are seeing models of great language development and instruction, as well as fine motor and some potential sensory needs that they can then provide throughout the school day when the SLP and the OT are not there.
So now we're going to open it up to questions if anyone in the room has any questions.
I read a question, Melissa, and I wanted to address it. Somebody in the audience typed in asking us how many special education teachers we have at our middle school sites. One of our middle schools, Mesa Verde, we have 4 special education teachers that co-teach and push into the general education classroom. Their caseloads run this year about 23 to 25 students each on the caseload. And really what drives our staffing needs at each site is the caseload. So I want to ensure that each case manager has less than 28. Typically, I start the year anywhere between 21 to 25 probably is the max, right? Because we're going to have initials throughout the year. And over at Chaparral Middle School, we also have 4 special education teachers with a caseload this year of about 21, if I remember correctly. We're probably up to 23 kids at this time of the year after we've had initial evaluations. And all 4 teachers are co-teaching and offering our core academic courses in that setting. I hope I answered your questions.